All right, attorney Frank Miranda here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. And before the break, we were kind of talking about, Frank, I think there's a lot of misnomers out there. You're hearing people talking about suing for COVID and, business owners. What's the business owner's responsibility? What's the patron's responsibility, for example? What are you seeing in that space, and what do you think's the real deal?
All right, we touched upon this earlier. There's been a new law passed in Florida regarding the restrictions on how to sue for a COVID-related infection by someone. And I was mentioning earlier, and I'm going to say this again, I think it's almost impossible to prove where anyone caught COVID. I don't think there's any scientific literature out there or testing that can definitively answer whether or not someone caught COVID at any particular place. Even if it's in a nursing home and no one else came in there, it's going to be very difficult to find out who or why someone got infected. Now, what people don't know is on the legal side, when you present evidence to the court, we're held to a standard where your opinion just can't be an opinion based on a doctor that doesn't have anything to substantiate that opinion. What I mean by that, and trying to break that down in normal English, is simply you have to have some sort of scientific basis of why you have that opinion. And if there is no scientific basis around the opinion that you can get from a doctor that perhaps you golf with, that you caught COVID somewhere, doesn't necessarily hold weight and won't be admissible in court. So rest assured, the court system supports all this madness on both sides of left and right and kind of makes sure that only certain things are heard in front of a jury. So, I think it's a lot of, on both sides of the fence, again, when you call it politically, I think it's a bunch of rhetoric. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be virtually impossible to prove where someone caught COVID.
Yeah, I agree. It's an invisible, disease. How do you find it, or virus rather? What about scams? We like to kind of highlight scams. Are you seeing any new strategies? I mean, people send these text messages to your phone all the time. It's like, hey, are you still selling this property to be some bogus link? They want you to click on that link. Of course, at that time, they'll probably take over your device, whether it's your computer, your iPhone, or your smartphone. In the title industry, there's a lot of frauds and scams too, with people kind of faking the wiring instructions. What are you seeing on that front?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of scams and going on. I think yesterday I received an email from a link that purported to be a lender on one of the transactions. Didn't name a transaction by name. It was click here to download the documents. I immediately sent it out to my team saying, does anyone have a closing involving this lender? No one did, and obviously, if you click on that download, who knows what happens? So I, immediately contacted my computer service, and I'm like, hey, I want a scan run on everything that I have. So yes, those scams are still outgoing. I just met with somebody, ironically, probably an hour ago before we got on the show. A seller was approached with an addendum saying we're buying this property for X amount of money, but we want to list half of that property as personal assets. And so I'm like, well, what are you selling outside the property? And like, nothing. I'm like, well, that's a scam to try and scam the government from taxes, real estate taxes down the road, from doc stamps on the title. I said, you can't do this. This is not legitimate.
Right.
And so buyers are trying to get that in writing, that they're buying a piece of property for, let's say, half the value, and they're throwing in some other personal property as part of the deal, and it's not real. That hurts all of us because those tax dollars help support firefighters and all the other things we need.
Right.
And so I'm like, you can't do this.
Yeah, exactly. And something else that's kind of topical, and by the way, if you just joined us, we're talking with attorney Frank Miranda here. He's got an office right on Cypress Street in Tampa, does real estate closings, real estate law, and of course he is a litigator as well. We'll go into the courtroom, I guess, when they let you go back in, but doing a lot via Zoom right now, and those types of things. The Hillsborough County Commission recently voted to increase the impact fees, and kind of to your point, we need to increase the transportation, the roadways, the fire. I mean, the EMS. It all comes hand in hand. What's your take? Have you seen that and heard about that?
No, I think I saw literally, I think about a week ago, an opinion where the latest hike that Hillsborough County had passed was deemed to be done inappropriately. So I think the sales tax is actually going to go down by 0.5%. And so I think that starts effective maybe April 1st. So, when we're talking about how this whole thing affects you with the scams and how buyers are trying to beat the system. This is not the first time I've seen it in the last month. And so within the last 30 days, I've seen it 2 or 3 times for buyers that are probably sophisticated or trying to beat the system and not really understanding, the sellers are not really understanding of what the implications are. And what the implications are is a government official come by and say, well, what personal property actually transfer hands on this? When they say none, then you're part of a conspiracy to defraud the government.
Wow.
And that sounds pretty bad.
Yeah. Would that be federal charges potentially then?
I would think it would be state because all those tax dollars are going to state. So doc stamps are going to state.
Yeah.
And so instead of paying doc stamps on, pick a number, you're paying doc stamps half the amount, and they're saying, half the amount, several $100,000 is for personal property.
Yeah.
And when they ask you, what did you sell them? The answer is going to be nothing.
Right.
And if you sold them nothing, then why did you do it?
Yeah. Interesting. And here's another one. Contract for deed / lease option to buy. Get that question a lot in the real estate space, people wanting to do that. First of all, typically when I see that, first thing I think about is, well, why wouldn't you buy it conventionally? What's going on here? Are there credit issues? Is it, potentially down payment? What's your thoughts on either a contract for deed or a lease option to purchase, Frank?
Okay, so that's a great question. A contract for deed is a mechanism that's still legal, and it was used a lot more decades ago. And all it means is this. I sell you a piece of property. You don't have the money to pay me. You're going to make me payments, and when you're done paying me, I will transfer the property into your name. It's really no different than having a mortgage and having the seller finance the deal. Okay. In fact, if they stop paying you, the law is for me to get that property back, I have to file a foreclosure action against you. So the law views that as simply being seller financing, and you still have to foreclose on that. So it's no different than seller financing. So even though the mechanism's different, a seller financing deal, I actually transfer the property to you, and I put a mortgage on the property, and I'm the bank.
Right.
And then obviously if you don't pay, I get to foreclose. Same thing, just in reverse. I just deed you the property at the end of the deal when you pay me, and it stays in my name. To be honest with you, if I'm the seller, I don't want the property in my name because if someone gets injured on that property, I may be brought into a lawsuit unnecessarily. So from that perspective, if I'm the seller, I'd rather just have a mortgage on the property and a lien on the property and take it back if you don't sell me, just like you would an agreement for deed, except you eliminate the possibility of being sued if someone gets hurt on that property.
That's a good point.
Now you're not the owner. Right. Now you're just a creditor.
Now, the question also comes up, sorry to interrupt there, Frank.
Yeah.
Seller held mortgage, contract for deed, okay. And then the question also comes up sometimes when we're structuring these deals, well, how much would it cost me if I did have to foreclose on that potential buyer, that tenant, that contract for deed, that leasee?
As a lawyer, it's the hardest question for me to answer, okay? Because I tell people all the time, every case, just like a river, charts its own course.
Yeah.
If they do nothing to defend it, then it's easy. It'll be pretty cheap. And pretty cheap means, let me explain this. The filing fee for some of these foreclosures can be up to almost $3,000. And the reason why that happened is because back in the day when we had that market crash, the government wasn't making any money on collecting sales taxes and whatnot. And so what they did is to foreclose, as they had the volume of work there, they made the foreclosing people pay the difference to make it up. And so the filing fee on a foreclosure is based on the value of the home. And the more the home is worth, the more the filing fee, and I think it caps out at around $3,000. So just to file it without an attorney could be up to $3,000. If they do nothing, you're looking probably anywhere, depending on the value of the home, between $3,500 and $5,000. If they fight it and they file bankruptcy, then you got to go get a bankruptcy attorney to go get a permission from the bankruptcy court to go ahead and secure the sale of a secured asset. So it can get costly. Okay, it can get costly. Now, if this is an investment property, all that is part of doing business. It's all tax deductible. So, now, you did ask about a lease to purchase, and that's perfectly fine. A lot of times what you'll see is it's a lease. At the end of the day, they have an option. You can actually charge for that option and say, rather than put this on the market, I will give you the option to purchase it. If you're a smart seller, you would charge a fee for that because you're taking that property off the market. Okay, so you're giving that person an opportunity, a first chance look.
Right.
I would charge a fee for that. If you charge a fee for that, then obviously if they exercise the option, then you sell it pursuant to the terms of the agreement.
Perfect. Awesome. Good stuff. Hey, we covered a lot of territory. Thanks a lot, Frank. That's some good stuff. Everything from federally backed mortgages, foreclosures, evictions, consumer, with the COVID scams. A lot of great stuff there, Frank. Thanks so much for your time, and appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Brandon. It's always a pleasure.
Take care, my friend. All right. Attorney Frank Charles Miranda right here in Tampa Bay. Check him out. He's over on Cypress, any real estate law, and, of course, title closings, real estate closings. Got a great team over there, Stephanie and Lauren. They do a great job. All right. When we come back, we're going to have Mold Zero in the house. Sarah Schneider is joining us here from Mold Zero. We're going to talk about some of the effects of, the silent killers that could be lurking in your homes. Also, our feel-good story of the day. Volunteers pick up 15,000 pounds of trash from the Tennessee River in 2 days. Stay with us. Consumer Quarterback Show, consumerqb.com.
Hey, just